So initial 50% mark in each task are comparatively easier. Start on time, end on time. You have to plan properly. That is the first requirement, that do not go into the theoretical details, rather apply. Dear students, welcome to the special session for guidance in one particular area of appearing in Strategic Business Leader, shortly as SBL. This session, this brief session, is aimed at providing a very specific set of tips for the students in order to manage time. Now, based on the previous few examiner reports, we have analyzed that one of the major issues that the students are facing is the proper time management. You see, earlier in the AFT level, you do not normally find time to be an issue because that is totally MCQs based. And that is of a knowledge based level, and you have much practice on those, and you grasp the concepts very well. And you usually, in my experience, I have never come across a student who has come out of the examination room after an AFD paper and had complained about that he had less time, even though usually the time there is about 2 hours. But later on, when you go into the skills level, you get a little bit of problems because there's subjective part, you have to attempt it. And the problem actually increases exponentially when we talk about the professional series. Now, the basic uh, problem is that the students have not been given solid, specific, concise time management tips that they can apply to. So, my aim today is to provide you with a few but very solid exam tips which will help you in achieving your passing marks to the fullest of your capabilities. Now, the problem is that sometimes what happens is, or rather most of the time what happens is, the student has a lot of knowledge, they know what to put in, but the time fails them. In other words, they have not properly timed, and therefore they are not able to attempt all the questions or up to the required level. So let's get on with it. Initially, I would like to discuss a few basics of the idea of what the paper is like. And I'm sure as SBL students, if you are studying now or if you are going to appear in the next session, you would know at least the basics of it. There are 3 tasks that are to be completed, and before that, a pre-scene is already issued 2 weeks before the examination, and you should have gone through it and completely understood and analyzed it properly before the exam day. So on the exam day, you have 3 tasks to be completed. The general allocation of marks based on the previous few paper attempts is given here. This is not exactly what we can expect in the next session, but this is a rough idea that you will get. Usually, the task one is about 30 to 35%. Task two is about 35 to 40 to 45%, and task three is more or less the same. We, in order to understand what we want to achieve or we want to plan, we will go with these percentages. Now, as you know, that in SBL, in order to pass the paper, you need to have 50% marks. That is the passing marks. The higher you aim, that the better. But we are going to take the very critical elements in discussion now. Now, the one of the first thing you need to remember is whenever a paper is set, and that is universal. Whenever a paper is set, examiner use the funneling techniques. The initial part of the task or a question is usually easier, and marking achieving marks in that first half or the first 50% marks is way easier than the later 50% marks. So that is the basic tip, and this will be our bottom line to start understanding this. So initial 50% mark in each task are comparatively easier, not easier, comparatively easier to the later 50% marks. Now, if we want to look at it graphically or on a graph, what we see is the 50% that is the green marks, those are comparatively easier, and the rest 50% are comparatively difficult. Now, later on, what you need to do is you have to aim to achieve 50% or higher in the first part of every task. And for the later, you can achieve more. That will go ahead with it. Now, the students must know, this is the key tip that I will be focusing upon. The students must know when to leave attempting an answer and move on to the next task. And I will explain you why. First of all, we need to understand this portion, and then I will give you the tips for managing your time with specific time allocations according to the marks. Now, what happens is we need to understand when you do not follow timelines. You need to understand its importance, and then we will talk about its how we should plan our time. So, if you look at the graph, what happens is if you have properly allocated the time, for example, this will be your first checkpoint. By this point, you should have completed your first task. By this time, you should have completed your second task, and this is the paper ending time. By this time, you should have completed your third task. Now, what happens when you start the paper without proper planning and you just start right away? What happens is usually the first task and the first half of the first task is comparatively easy, and the student may feel confident and they would start writing. I will talk about it later on. What are the mistakes when you attempt the paper in writing the content within? But at the moment, you need to understand, first of all, if you use more time in the first part of the first question, which you see as an easier part, and you are writing more in it than required, and what happens, you do not know, because you are excited about it, you have prepared well, and the task is easier for you. You keep on writing, you keep on attempting, and the time limit for that has passed merely because you did not plan. And another tip, you did not write the timings, so the time has gone. But obviously you do not stop there because you did not have these tips. So you keep on writing and you go beyond the required time that was there for the task one, and you go beyond that. Now, once you go beyond that, obviously you cannot start the task two here, and based on that, you will start the task two at a later point when you end the task one. So, mainly, you should have completed the task one here at this point, and you should have started the task two here right away. What you have done, this is the additional time that you have taken, which should have been allocated for task two, and you have attempted it, used it in time in one. So what happens is, obviously you have to start the question too late. So this is the first mistake that you have done. Now, if you repeat the same in the second, you do not follow the proper planning, or you did not have planning altogether. What you do is, again you make the same mistake, and this time you are starting to get panicked, and you do not attempt this question well, and still you use more time than it should have been allocated. So you should have completed your time two here, task two here, but because you did not start it at the right time, you delayed your start, and again you are trying to give it full time so that you attempt all parts of it. So what you do is you move on to the next. So what happens is, now the time there where you should have started the task three, you did not. And what happens because of that, you start it at a delay, and the time ends, and you have not even completed the first even 10% of that task. So eventually what happens, because you did very well in the first part, maybe you get about more than 50% marks, say around 60, 65 or 66, it makes your percentage. But the next, you started to panic and you did not do very well in that part, and you are now focusing on the time as well. You do even less than that. And for the last portion, obviously, you did not have enough time. And finally, you panic, you start to get jitters in your tummy and butterflies and all, and you are panicking. What happens is, now you're not getting the full marks, let alone the 50% marks, let alone the 25% marks. You're way beyond below that. So what happens is, if you sum them up, you get a total of 49% that will result in your failure. Now, we consider this strategy. Now, I'm not saying that you should do this, but if there is an issue, you have to follow this strategy. So what you should do, Number one, start on time, end on time. You have to plan properly. So what you do, even if you complete the task on time, and if you get 50% marks in each of the question, you will pass the paper. Now remember, rest of the marks will be bonus, because professionally it won't matter how many additional marks you have got in your paper. ACCA gives you certification based on your passing, not on your distinction. Distinction is an added bonus, no doubt about it. But your first target is to achieve 50% marks. Now, what do we need to do that? Now that you have a basic understanding of what happens when you fail to plan. Now, this is my favorite quote of all times. Failing to plan is planning to fail. Meaning, if you're not planning ahead, you're actually planning to get failed. So now is the time. You have to focus. You have to have a complete roadmap of how you're going to attempt your paper, and accordingly, you have to apply that plan when you're sitting for the paper. Now, because there are no surprises, it's not possible that they give you a 5 hours paper or 2 hours paper. This is a standard that is going to be there. So the total time for the paper is 3 hours and 15 minutes. That makes you over about 195 minutes. Now, the mark allocation is that there are 80 technical marks and 20 professional marks. Now, the professional marks are embedded. It is how you attempt the paper, how you format the paper, and we will make another special video on how to achieve professional marks. But for this time allocation, you need to remember that you do not need to allocate marks, sorry, time or minutes for achieving these marks. You need to allocate time for these 80 marks. Now, how you do that? What you do, number one, first, see, you have total 195 minutes, out of which you take 35 minutes for reading and planning, initial planning. Now, remember, pre-scene is already there in your mind before the paper. And keeping that in context, you have to read the paper and plan all of it. Now we come to the main part, time budgeting. Now, remaining part out of 195, when you remove the 35 minutes reading and planning, you have 160 minutes, roughly for 80 marks. Roughly, it is about 2 minutes per mark. That will be your basic guideline, basic bottom line for your mark allocation. So let's see how do we apply it. For example, this is an extract from one of the previous papers. Suppose now, this is the task one, and I'm just going to give you example of this so that you have an idea and you can apply it to the rest of the task as well. So this is the 12 marks, and we have the major rule of thumb as 2 marks per minute. So you will have to allocate 12 marks times 2. That will give you 24 minutes for attempting this part 1. Then is part B, 1A. This will be 1B. That also has 12 marks. So you will have 24 minutes. And in total, you have 48 minutes to attempt this task 1. Now, this should not be only in your head. When you start marking the answer, write down the starting time and the ending time. That would tell you when to stop attempting it and jumping to the next part. Now, obviously, if you have prepared well, if you have taken regular classes, if you have kept in mind all the other items that we are going to discuss in the other tips that we are going to discuss in this session, and you have prepared well, then obviously by this time you would have completed more than half of the task. At least if you are very well prepared, you would have completed all of it. But if not, then you would have completed about 60 to 70% of it, no doubt. But this is the point that you need to remember. If the time is over and your task is not completed, leave that question, because it is more than half and you will achieve 50% marks in this if you have prepared well, and jump on to the next question because of the previous slide that I just discussed with you. Now, if you apply the same strategy, check the marks, allocate the time, check the marks, allocate the time. And when the answers, you start writing the answer, check your allocation, write the starting time, and write the time and at which you will end. Obviously, you can take 1 or 2 minutes up and beyond. For example, if you are not very good at remembering the time in these numbers, you can say 45 minutes. That will give you an added advantage in the next question. Or you can write 50 minutes. Then you actually know that you have to give lesser time in the next question. If you can stick to this 48 exact minutes, that will be better. So add a start time and the finish time to your question, to your answer when you are attempting. This is the second most important tip that I have given you today. Now, once we do that, what are the additional contributors of poor time management? First of was you haven't time properly manage your time. Now, these are the extracts from the previous examiner reports that are here. Number one, what you do, what most students do who fail, they waste time including material that is not relevant to the task requirement. For example, a given theory, now you know that you do not need to specifically give reference to a theory. If you give it, okay, fine, it bears no marks. But the problem is that you start discussing the theory. For example, if there is a motivation theory, a leadership theory, a theory on the allocation of resources, whatever it is not required for you to tell the examiner about the theory. It is how you apply that theory to the given question. That is what is required. So you can pick the points, you can refer to those points, but apply those points onto the uh, case at hand. That is the first requirement, that do not go into the theoretical details, rather apply those theories on the question that is in front of you. Number two, more than required or very lengthy plans. Do not go in too much length. Number one, it will not put a good impression on the examiner. Number two, it will not give you any additional marks. Number three, it will haunt you with the poor time management, because again the same thing will happen. You would have not completed the answer and the time you allocated would have gone. Finally, the most important tip, redundant information. Do not repeat the thing. The examiner will get the idea. They will not give you additional marks for repeated writing, whether that be in the same words or the different words. But keep on emphasis should be in the professional way with your wordings, not with repeating information. Final tip of the day, and I would say that would be the third most important tip of the day. Do not go into the exam session without at least attempting 2 mocks in under exam condition. What is under exam condition? Start a timer when you start the paper and put it to 3 hours and 15 minutes, and you must be able to complete that before within that given time. So for example, if you take out say September 2024 pre-scene, you have prepared it beforehand. Now you sit for the examination, the paper is in front of you in the marks, and you start your time clock and you start attempting it. Do these all these tips and marks allocation for that, and see if you are able to complete it. If not, that is not on. You will have to attempt this. This will not count. Attempt it again. Then attempt one more mock in the same fashion. Once you do that, do not put it to like this is a professional series. These skills are also required of you. Now, if you what most students do is they know the content very well and they have attempted, like for example, when I teach in my lectures, during the lecture I give in exam practice question, I give some time for the students to write the answer, but not in the details, in the bullet points, so that I can compare if they have applied the knowledge that I've just taught onto a given scenario. But that is not on for the paper. Actually, you have to write in detail. Just the bullet points won't get you marks. So once you apply your knowledge onto the exam paper under exam conditions, that will actually prepare you for the final examination. So I hope that today's brief session was some help for you. We will continue posting such material for you. Stay tuned, take care, and goodbye.